Hello there, Stanley Carr here. I love collecting music and sports memorabilia. Want to know where you can find some? I'll tell you. Go to oldglory.com. This website features one-of-a-kind apparel from your favorite sports teams and musical artists. And I can help you get 15% off of all items. Use the code WWH135. Enjoy the episode.
Welcome to Wrestling with Heart, a podcast looking at pro wrestlers giving back to their community. Join me, Stanley Carr, as I interview wrestling's hottest names who use their platforms as entertainers to raise awareness and do community service.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Wrestling with Heart. This is the show where we talk with professional wrestlers and professional wrestling personalities about their lives in and outside of the ring, as well as doing acts of charity work, community service, volunteering, and spreading positivity. We're always about the positive vibes here on the show. And with me right now, I've got a very special guest. He is a ECW original, legendary ECW referee, Jim Molineaux. Welcome, Jim, to Wrestling with Heart.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
It's my pleasure. So talk to me about your childhood. Where did you grow up?
I grew up outside of Philadelphia, in New Jersey, so everyone knows it as South Jersey, in a town called Haddon Township, and it was 15 minutes over the bridge into Philadelphia.
Yeah, I mean, when I've had people on the show that have come from that area, it's like it's a very big kind of cluster because you have Philadelphia, New Jersey, New York, and it's a huge like wrestling area.
Yeah.
A lot of wrestling events, wrestling shows. The fans very passionate about the sport and the business.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
I mean, at that time in the 80s and 90s, you had so much wrestling at your fingertips that you could watch. Kind of like today, except back then, when you're talking about television, you had to flip through the TV channels and find the local listings to whenever wrestling came on.
Right.
So I'm sure that was your story.
Oh yeah. I mean, I guess I'm older than I look, or most people think, but I'm 64, so I grew up in the 60s, late 60s, early 70s for the beginning of my wrestling fandom. And got away from it in the Philadelphia area. The Philadelphia area just became absolutely berserk for hockey because the Philadelphia Flyers had won the Stanley Cup 2 years in a row. And at the time I was 14, 15, something in that age range. So like everybody all the kids dropped everything they were doing and went out and got hockey gloves and hockey sticks and hockey nets, and everyone was playing street hockey. And I did that for a long time and got away from watching wrestling. I only watched hockey, and then just excuse me, the growth of growing up in high school and the things that come along. I got away from the hockey and got into playing guitar a little bit and playing in bands, garage bands, and all that kind of stuff. And never got back to wrestling until I was already married, had one child, and a guy that I worked with was into wrestling, and we started, watching, and we'd talk about it, coming to work Monday and talk about what we saw on Saturday or Sunday, whenever it was, and that's how I got back into it.
So it took a wrestling event that you just attended to and that's when you decided, okay, I kind of got the bug here to try this out.
Yeah, well, I went to the first show I ever went to wasn't until I was 27, something like that. This guy from work that I knew, we went and saw the Great American Bash of 97, I guess it was. Yeah, 97 at the Philadelphia Civic Center. Or I'm sorry, 87. I'm changing my numbers around here, but 87 at the Philadelphia Civic Center. And Joel Goodhart was co-ring announcing, and Joel eventually at the time only had his radio show and fan club. So I started listening to the radio show, joined the fan club, and then he started TWA. But back at that show, I was like, hey, maybe I could get involved in wrestling. And I always had a little bit my foot in acting a little bit. So I thought, well, there's a venue that I haven't tried. So I wanted to be a manager. And like I said, I joined Joel's fan club and done some managing at absolutely no name outlaw shows that nobody ever saw. And and so I finally went to Joel and I said, "Hey, do you need a manager? I'd like to come in, be a part of the TWA," because he had been running for a year maybe. And he said, "I don't really need a manager, but I could use a referee," and sold me on, what it would cost and going to the school because he had a school also, and all the aspects of being a referee. And he said, I'll use you every show, which he did. He said, you'll make the money back that you pay to your school, to the school, in a year. And and I did. Surprisingly, that might be one of the only promoters that told me this is what's going to happen. So he said, think about it for a couple of days and give me a call back. So I hung up and I called him back 10 minutes later, and I was there the next Tuesday at the school.
Did you find it hard to referee at first, or did it come naturally? Because I know it can be kind of stressful at times because you're trying to call the match down the middle, and somehow something messes up, and you don't know what to do. If the things go wrong, it can be pandemonium.
Yeah, no, I think I found it fairly easily. I never really asked other guys how long it took them to train. But it took me 8 weeks before I did my first match. So I guess that's pretty good. So I felt pretty comfortable in the ring. I don't think I've ever really felt too nervous. Maybe that first match and maybe the first time we did TV. I know I was nervous the first pay-per-view at Barely Legal, absolutely shaking. But yeah, I don't get too nervous in the ring.
What were some things that Joel or some of your mentors kind of helped you with early on, kind of guided you along, pieces of advice that they gave you that you still apply to today after your time in ECW?
Well, John Finnegan was my trainer, and John I worked with all through ECW. In fact, we're the only two ECW originals that were there from day one till the end of the promotion, the original promotion, not the Sci-Fi Channel promotion. Um, and he just worked with me and said, you got to relax. Call it like it's real. Call it like you were a referee in a football game or a referee in a hockey game. Enforce the rules if there are rules. And just positioning and I think more or less more probably what took me more time was positioning. Other than I was pretty good with carrying my voice and knowing the rules and making sure that they heard me and I like to make sure that the fans hear me too. A lot of people don't do that. A lot of referees just count and pound the mat, 1, 2, 3. But I like to count too because not everybody is hearing that, and also it helps the wrestlers because if there's a manager on the outside and he's pounding on the mat, get up, get up, get up. The number, hearing that and my count can be confusing to someone who's not watching. So I like to be vocal with my counts also.
Yeah, and plus too, the fans are into it as well, so they see what's going on. If they see something that shouldn't have happened or something that was supposed to happen, their eyes are glued in as well.
Absolutely, and the Philadelphia fans are tough. I mean, they're known for their hard nosed fandom. But I guess that's because Philadelphia is a really hardworking blue collar town. So I think if you are a hardworking guy in the ring, they'll appreciate what you do.
Do you remember the first match you ever refereed?
Yeah, it was in Westchester, Pennsylvania, at the Westchester. I think it was. It wasn't the Boys and Girls. It was a rec center. It was Westchester Rec Center, and it was Jimmy Janetti against Glenn Osborne for Tri-State Wrestling Alliance. and that was the only match I did that night.
And when you walked to the back after the first show, do you remember the feedback you got?
Not really. I think it must have been pretty good or okay because I'm really good at remembering when somebody criticizes or points out things. I remember things like that. So I must have done pretty good if I want to call it.
And you went on, of course, to have such an incredible career in ECW. As you mentioned, you were one of two of the originals referees that were a part of that promotion. Talk to me about joining ECW and any memories you want to share about your time there, because people still go back. I've interviewed so many people from ECW since I've started the show, and from what I've gathered, the bonds that the men and women and the athletes and everybody that worked together, it really was such a family environment.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a family product, but it was definitely a family environment behind the scenes. There may have been infighting, like any brother or sister would fight in a family. But if someone came up and tried something with my fellow ECW brother or sister, then we were right there to back them up. So it was definitely a family feeling in that sense. Um, yeah, coming into ECW, I mean, since we were there day one, we started out with just doing rec centers and high schools and bars and that kind of stuff. And I just went along with the flow of, okay, now we're going to do TV. And so Eddie Gilbert came in and was the booker for the company at the time. And I just was good at taking things in and learning from different people. So I learned different ways of working with Eddie Gilbert, not only in the ring but behind the scenes too. Um, and then Eddie left and Paul took over, and then we moved on to pay-per-views, and that was something, a different aspect to take in, and we started touring further around the country, not just in the Philadelphia, New York area. We went out to Buffalo, and we went down to Florida, went to Chicago, and it started growing. Um, and then like I said, the pay-per-view was a big thing. I just took that day in. I didn't, we were supposed to report at 12:30, and it didn't start till 9 o'clock. They Jews for some reason wanted to start an hour later because they didn't trust us for some reason. So why delaying us an hour? I don't know. But we're that outlaw crew. So we started at 9 o'clock, and so everybody checked in at the building, and Paul said, "Okay, go get something to eat, go take a nap or whatever." I sat there at the building and soaked it all in. I'm like, who knows if I'm ever going to do this again? But yeah, there's some of the memories of the company.
Yeah, ECW seemed like were the underdogs because you had WWF, you had WCW, the two big giants of the industry, and the Monday Night Wars. This was a really, really big period for professional wrestling. And then ECW comes along, really creates this following, like really gets a lot of, people, riled up and excited. Um, and people still talk about it to this day. What can you tell me about your first memories of meeting Paul Heyman and getting the chance to work with him behind the scenes?
Well, I had actually met Paul before ECW at a Tri-State Wrestling Alliance show. He had come in, and I wasn't even reffing yet. I was doing security for Joel. I hadn't gotten into the ring yet, and he was okay. Talked with him and was very nice. And working with him before he took over, I drove around with him a lot. Um, so I got to know him a little bit before he became the boss, and luckily he liked me, and I got to stick around and was used fairly often, and he kind of I was one of the people he kind of relied on to do the right thing if asked. Picking people up the airport or making sure this or that got done behind the scenes, even if it was something as simple as handing out the checks, whether they were good or not.
Barely Legal was such an iconic pay-per-view, and people still talk about it. Any fond memories uh, during the show that you enjoyed? Favorite matches that you got to work during that card?
Well, like I said, just sitting there all day and taking it in was the main thing for me. I did do the RVD Lance Storm match, and if you go back and watch it, and who knows where you can see those things now because they're switching things around from Peacock to Netflix and whatever other streaming system they have. Um, but if you look real carefully, somewhere through the match, I ripped my pants right in the crotch. And luckily, I was taught to bring an extra pair of pants and extra shirt, so I luckily changed my pants.
That's embarrassing. That had to have been just
Yeah, I
one
mean,
of the.
I felt it, and I was like, "Oops!" And I kind of covered it up and kind of waddled my way through the match. And then when I got home, and of course, being a mark for myself, I taped it and I went back and watched it, and I could see just a little sliver of tidy whities, and and that was it. Just this one little one, and I covered it up pretty well.
Only on live television.
Right.
True professional. Got to do the job and move on. So, best part about refereeing, least favorite part about refereeing.
Um, wow. I don't think I've ever been asked that. That's best part of about it is being able to help the match. I think being an important part of the match without being out there in front of everyone. If a fan was to say or talking about a match and they go, "Oh, I didn't know you did that match," that meant that's good. That meant I did my job, unless I was supposed to be out there and imposing or part of the match for some reason. Otherwise, if they don't know that you did this match or that match, great, I did my job. Um, Worst part, getting in the way of objects being thrown into the ring at someone else. I've been hit with a few things. Yeah, that's not fun.
Yeah, I mean, when you're around a crowd like the ECW audience that are very passionate about the industry and very passionate about what these men and women do every night, I mean, they're gonna be in for a rude awakening if they don't
Oh
if they don't
yeah.
like what they see. um, okay, yes. So outside of Barely Legal, what have been some of your favorite matches that you got to be a part of in ECW?
Hmm. Well, any of the Eddie Guerrero, Dean Malenko matches, loved working those, and John will tell you the same thing. It got to the point where we just switched on and off. Tonight's my night, tomorrow's your night, because we both wanted to work with them. Um, and matches where new guys came in, um, working with Rey Mysterio the first time. Um, there was one match that I just saw on TV a little while ago. Somebody had it up on YouTube, and I didn't realize it until I went back and watched it. It was the first night that Tommy Rich was in with ECW, and he wrestled Terry Funk. And I looked back at it and was like, "Oh my God, I was in the ring with two NWA champions." And it just never hit me that I was just so focused on doing my job that I didn't do anything, didn't go, wow, look at that. Hey, how about that? Look at me, you know. But I can go back and look at things like that now and go, wow, that was pretty cool.
You know, it's interesting how you bring up guys like that were huge in the 70s and 80s with the NWA. You've heard of guys like Steve Austin, Mick Foley, the Dudley Boys, names that people all know that made their names in WWE have their careers in ECW. That's where they began. Guys like Jericho and Guerrero and Benoit. But seeing guys like Scott Hall or Dusty
Yeah, that
Rhodes
that was
make
a good night
appearances.
too. Yeah, I worked with Scott those two nights that he came in. And what was cool about that was the second night in Poughkeepsie, they had him scheduled to work someone and just do an absolute squash. And he goes, "No, I don't want to do that. I want to come in and I want to put somebody over." And he looked around and he goes, "You," and he pointed at Big Sal from the FBI. He goes, "I want to work with you and make you look like a superstar." And he did. He had a great match with him. And then he went on and had a second match against Just Incredible, which is a really, really good match, too, if you go back and watch that.
I just think ECW just was so revolutionary with what everyone was doing, and you could just feel it in the product that people just had a good time. They loved what they were doing, and the
Yeah,
energy
the
level.
I think ECW let guys do what they wanted to do, but within the scope of ECW. You know, somebody would say, "Well, to Paul, oh, I want to do this." Okay, well, we can do it, but let's do it. Let's turn it a little bit and do it this way. So it fits in with what we do. Where if you were to work with one of the two bigger companies, they hand you a script and go, "Here's what you're doing."
Were you there until the very last day of ECW?
Yeah, I was there, and in fact, I was there for the two one night stands, and I was there for 2 weeks, 2 weeks of TV tapings at Sci-Fi.
That had to have been hard hearing like one of the biggest promotions in wrestling history having to close. That was just so sad.
Yeah, I mean, technically, we're the third largest company in the country, so we're like, oh, we have people in the building. How are we losing money? And we didn't know the a lot of us didn't know the finances, and we thought, well, all right, so we'll slow down a little bit, and we'll do a pay-per-view, and maybe do a couple of closer house shows, and maybe tighten things up, not travel as far, not travel as much. But no, that was it. So Paul moved on, and everybody else moved on in their own different way.
You had mentioned working the one night stands and a couple of the ECW, the WWECW shows. What made you decide to not continue on past the initial launch period of the relaunch of ECW?
Well, first of all, they weren't offering a contract, never offered a contract. So at the time, I had a courier service that I actually just closed last year to move. But I had a courier service, and I was making just as much, if not more, doing that by staying at home instead of all the expenses I was putting out for any kind of travel. So the first 2 weeks of the Sci-Fi, the first week was in Trenton, New Jersey, which I was living in New Jersey at the time, so it was a half-hour drive, not a problem. The next week was Albany, New York, which I think was maybe 3.5, 4 hours, something like that. And drove up with a couple of the other referees. And the next one was scheduled for, I think, Charleston, West Virginia. And I said, nah, I'm not going that far. They never talked to me about making any kind of offer. So I was like, well, you know what? It's my decision. I'm not going to do it. And I still had my hand in wrestling. I was helping run the Monster Factory at the time. So I said, well, I can do that. That'll keep me from going absolutely insane, not being involved. And I just walked away from the bigger picture.
We're helping to build the next generation of stars as well. So that's a feather in your cap
Well,
too.
yeah. I mean, when I went to the Monster Factory after ACW shut down. They were not that far away from where I was living at the time, and they had in there at the time John Tolan, who went on to be James Dick, one of the Dicks, if you remember that from SmackDown, and Cliff Compton, who was Domino in Deuce and Domino. Were already there. And after I had been there, this kid from Ireland shows up and wants to train, and that was Sheamus. So we trained Seamus for a little bit, and he ended up going back home. And while I was there, this big kid from New York shows up, and he's now still with the WWE, Damian Priest. So
So
I can't say I won't say that I trained them, but I had something to do with it.
yeah, you had a hand in their development, and look where they're at now. They're megastars.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to switch gears and talk about some of the stuff you've done outside of wrestling. I know you've been very involved with charity work and have volunteered in different places over the years. What kinds of things have you done to help out in your community?
Well, I think with when I was running the Monster Factory, I had the opportunity to say, okay, let's do something at our events. So I made sure that when October came around, we were doing something for the local food bank. So I made sure food bank was on the ticket, and at the same time preparing for Christmas and the holidays in December, we made sure we did something with Toys for Tots. So I made sure that those were done every year. If there was a charity that came along, we try to help them out. We did a couple events. It wasn't the Monster Factory. We not even to get into the story, but we split away. Myself and my partner split away from the Monster Factory, and we started something called OTW, Old Time Wrestling, and we were still training guys, and we were running events also. And we got involved with Stockton University, which is a college just outside of Atlantic City. And for three years, or three times, I don't think it was 3 years, but three times we did something for their veterans organization. And I'm very proud of how well those shows went. I wish I had all three of them on video. I'd put them out and give the money to charity. Just that I'm just so proud of them. I think they were ran so well. But yeah, there were a couple of things that I did.
Was there a particular moment when you were helping out at these different venues that was really heartwarming for you?
I think the first one we did for the veterans organization really hit. Just because I had an uncle who was killed during the Korean conflict, and in fact, it wasn't a warfare death. He was killed by a drunk driver coming home to visit his mother. Uh, and I'm named after him. I never met him. I was born 9 years after he passed away. So doing something for the veterans always meant something for me.
Yeah, I mean, helping those that have served our country, I mean, that definitely, goes a long way. Being proud of what they were able to do, fighting for causes, fighting
Yeah.
for our freedoms. So, for you, what is it about giving back to the community that gives you the most joy?
Well, I think you really need to in a business like this, because if you don't give back to the fan base, they're not going to give to you. I always was taught to not only not be charitable, but be accessible, be friendly, and give back to the fan base. I saw Jim Duggan do it one time where he came into the hotel, and I was just sitting in the lobby, and he came into the hotel and he got swamped by people, and he turned around. He wasn't mad at all, and said, "Look, guys, let me check in. Let me go upstairs and wash up a little bit. Just give me 10 or 15 minutes. Let me wash up a little bit. I'm going to call home, check on things there, and then I'll come down and sign everything you have." And 15 or 20 minutes later, here he comes off the elevator, and he signed everything that people had in the lobby. Now, this was in the time when people would just come up with one or two things, not like when they meet you at the airport now and they've got a stack of photos to sign. But I talked to him later about it, and he said, "These are the people that pay my mortgage. You have to get to know them and be give back to them, even if it's just an autograph or take a picture." So I've always remembered that.
Yeah, kindness just goes a long way.
Yeah,
It just goes
sure
to
does.
just a smile and a how are you can brighten someone's day, even if they're feeling down. It can lift them up.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, whether I don't win or lose in being involved in wrestling as a referee, but being part of that and knowing that somebody out there is having a good time, enjoying themselves, getting away from their woes of the day, is good.
It's an escape.
Yeah, it's an escape for me too.
Well, Jim, this has been wonderful getting the chance to have you on. Wrestling with Heart means a lot to me and to my listeners and viewers that are watching this on YouTube. I want to say thank you for coming on. Where can people find out more about you on social media? And please feel free to plug anything that you've got coming up.
Well, for social media, if you go to Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. It's at Jim Molineaux, JimMolineaux. It's all lowercase letters. And if you go to Facebook, it's just Jim Molineaux. Just search me and it'll show up. I'm the only one on there. And that's all the media, the social media stuff you can, and that's where I put up like events and things coming up, what I'm doing.
Well, Jim, thanks again, and you're more than welcome to come back.
Oh, great. I'll make sure I stop in.
All right, take care.
Thank you.
This is Wrestling with Heart. I hope you found this podcast to be informative and entertaining. If you did, please hit the subscribe button and look out for the next edition.